How to treat healing crisis. In terms of disease, we have the head of the disease, so to speak, the origin, and then we have a long body and a long tail. And very often what happens when we come to a doctor and we already have some diagnosis, or there is a very, very chronic endocrine situation, so every time there is something stress related, there is a flare up. What we do, we try to suppress the tail, so to speak. We try to put something on here, some paracetamol, some antibiotics, something to relieve the symptoms. We are not looking into what is the tail of. In all natural medicine traditions, we are looking to unravel the whole thing back to the origin. Traumatic injury do happen, but the whole profile of disease is changed dramatically to the side of psychosomatic diseases. Every time we're talking about psychosomatic diseases, we talk about some original situation, very difficult, very acute psycho-emotional situation, very often happened in childhood when you feel totally powerless, or something that happened later in life which create a massive impact on the person. Sometimes things happen when people are well in their 20s and they are not yet fully mature. So not necessarily childhood or pre-memory. This is the area we would often go to when looking for a situation when we don't have any power, any scope for action, and this is why everything is of imprinting value on us. Very often this acute event, which can act as a trigger for development of very often lifelong situation. Sometimes what happens, this is a really long, very subthreshold, but chronic situation. The person is unhappy. So, for example, a little neglect from parents, and who didn't suffer that? And depending on child, if child is really independent and they're curious and they're full of energy, they can survive this. Here is this big, wide world open for them, and they're ready to explore, and they're happy, they're content. And here is a child who is very emotionally attached to a family member, and this family member is not available for them. Not necessarily they don't love them. I came across a situation when parents just had a very difficult situation of their own. I remember many dramatic stories which people told me about how they didn't receive love as little children because parent was not around. When we talk about parents who was not around, we find out very often that the parent just worked 2 or 3 jobs, and they were not around for a reason because they really needed to provide food and shelter. And that was the highest expression of love for the child, because they simply did not have resources, time, or energy for anything else. But for child, if child was sensitive, if child really needed this time together, and some children needed more than the others, and there is no judgment, we're all different. It's very difficult to estimate what we need. Some children need more independence. Some children who were brought independence, they crave time together. Some children who had a lot of time together, they crave independence. But in a situation when there is a perception of not enough love, and this goes on for a really long time, that can also create this pattern which then goes on and develop itself into something which later on gives rise to functional disturbances, which is endocrine basic patterns and toxic patterns and degenerative patterns. Now, why I went into such a long side tour to paint the picture. When we're talking about healing crisis, right, we talk about degenerative basic pattern very often. We're talking about some massive stagnation of chi and blood, which we start shifting with our therapies, and it brings us either to some kind of toxic lymphatic situation in the body. You react on the body level, which is pain or inflammation or some kind of acute illness, or we come to a psychological situation, healing crisis. It's a healing in itself, but the person struggles to cope with the situation on their own. First, let's talk about healing crisis in terms of body situation. So we have some stagnation of chi and blood, we have some degenerative basic pattern. We gave the person some treatments for degenerative basic pattern to shift, to start loosen up rigid structures and create what is a natural therapy called freedom and movement in the body. And body started to react, and very often this reaction will manifest as a headache or a stomach upset, or a cold, or something different, or a flare-up of your favorite itis, gastritis, appendicitis, tonsillitis, cystitis, whatever itis is your favorite itis. And then basically we need to support the body here with our toxic lymphatic therapies, whatever we have at Colourpuncture for this, and obviously common sense as well. If you have a cold, if you have common cold, any respiratory illness, You also need to keep warm. You can do steam inhalations with some oils and so on. If you have cystitis, you need to follow a diet which will really take care of acid-alkaline imbalance in the body. If you have gastritis flare-ups, then you need to be really careful with what you're eating, and it's better maybe not to eat for the time till it settles and so on.